Good morning, everyone. Welcome as you start coming on in. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad, here on Sick of This Shit Publications for an Intelligent Masculinity interview with Jason Odell, the photographer's perspective, and someone who I've gotten to know over the past few months, who takes some amazing photography, does some really pretty things, brings some joy to all of us, and has some really cool shows of his own. Um, and the dress up and the costumes and the skits that you do, really fun. Good morning, everyone. It's good to see all of you. Jason, good morning. Do you mind introducing yourself to everyone in the audience as I drop my tens machine on the floor?
Not at all. Yeah, get that fixed. Thanks, Nick. It's really a pleasure to be here. I'm glad we're finally able to get the streams connected in the right way. We've crossed paths a few times, but I'm Jason Odell. I never expected to be doing this for a living. I'm a self-employed photographer in Colorado Springs, Colorado, elevation 6,800 feet at my house currently. I have a PhD in biology from the University of California, Riverside, back in a previous lifetime. But photography has always been one of my passions. And through absolute sheer luck and a little hard work, I've been able to turn this into a business that keeps me more or less afloat. It's equal parts amazing and terrifying to be self-employed. I'll put it that way. So,
Yeah.
And I came over to Substack in the January of 25 as a way to convince myself to start writing more, because I had really let my photography blogging kind of wane. It just had fallen to the wayside with other projects that I had been doing. And now that there's this platform where we have multiple media formats, I've been exploring that and trying to take advantage of it as best as I can.
Awesome. Well, I'm glad you're here. We've crossed paths a few times, and we had originally scheduled an intelligent masculinity discussion a few months back. I can't believe it's been months at this point.
I can't believe it's August at this point.
Yeah, I can't believe it's already. I've been doing this, I think, every week, at least once a week since January at this point, and it's really good to have you part of our series and discussion. And I'm glad to be able to be on today. I'm still feeling a bit under for friends. I'm pushing through right now. I've got my tens machine going on my back so that I can at least sit down and be comfortable. But I'm trying not to let it slow me down right now, because we've got a lot of important things to talk about, but I'm also taking care of myself. And so, Jason, I'm glad to have you with me finally.
Thanks.
And so I wanted to get your thoughts on some of this stuff before we get into any of our questions. We have a list of questions that I pretend to try and get to.
And I have not studied, so
And Jason has had no prep time because I did not send them to him ahead of time. But these are fun. We have a good conversation, and I love to discuss beforehand some of the things that are going on in the world, how you're reacting to them, things that you've seen or heard, and just news that's going around. So there's been a lot in the last months. Yes, I'm joined by Jean-Luc Picard today. He's just missing his unit. He's in the holodeck and not wearing his uniform this morning. He's play acting for us.
Make it so, Nick.
I don't have a trombone, and I can't right now do the Riker stand.
I was going to say, you can't do the Riker maneuver over your chair.
No, I can't do a Riker maneuver over the chair right now. I'd lose my tens machine and it would hurt. So, Jason, there's a lot that's been going on these last few weeks, months, everything in the world that's been happening. And one of the big things that we're really going through right now is a true crisis of masculinity. And I don't say that as though it's anybody else's fault. It is a self-imposed crisis on masculinity through cultural appropriation, through backsliding. And I just wanted to get your thoughts on some of the more obnoxious things that we see.
Where shall we begin?
Where shall we begin? Let's let's begin with someone who is just a giant piece of crap, and is showing us a lot of what unintelligent, toxic, and false masculinity looks like, and that would be someone like RFK Jr. Um, and the things that he is doing and proposing, and this one may be a smaller thing that he's done, but we're right now decimating the health system and
Mhm.
health and human services, turning it into health and human sacrifices. And while doing that, he's promoting a new cooking show. And
Oh, I haven't seen that one
oh,
yet.
you haven't seen this?
I try to stay away from, like, he sounds like an intubated earthworm when he speaks. I
Yes,
mean,
yes.
it's like blowing through a bologna skin and they calling it, I don't know what's in his,
Ugh.
or something like
That was
that.
gross. I'm glad I wasn't drinking coffee when you said that. So RFK Jr. though has a this grand idea for his Maha Make America highly addicted again movement. His Maha movement is saying we need a new cooking show where you can eat for like $5, but the only foods that you get are the ones that are already pre-poisoned and destroyed by the lack of FDA approvals and oversight, and just the disgust that he has for human life. He's trying to kill people, in my opinion.
Hmm.
What do you think about folks like RFK and what they're trying to impose upon people with these destructive policies?
I mean, well, and I'll go back and have to read that one. There's an effed up Friday story for you, right, Nick? But this is simply, more of the same. This idea, and it's been prophesized by, a lot of people in the past, that there's this utter contempt for anything that is backed by science in and on the right, generally speaking, but it has been so imbued into this current administration, this idea that, and I'm not going to pick on Lauren Boebert, but Lauren Boebert is well known to have a GED, and that's fine. If that's what you get, that's what you get, and more power to you. Get whatever education you can. But this idea that sitting on the toilet scrolling YouTube videos for bias confirmation, and this idea that my high school diploma somehow makes me as good as your PhD in a field, or in the case of my art, who should be everybody's freaking hero, Anthony Fauci, because this man literally saves lives. And I don't know if you saw that they were trying to hold him in contempt this morning. I don't know how the vote
I
came
saw
out.
that.
I don't know if it went through, which is utter crap, because the entire point of the Fifth Amendment is that you are protected from self-incrimination. So how can you be held in contempt of court for exercising your constitutional rights? Now, in the case of RFK, I mean, this guy is pandering to this subset because he's a full-on hypocrite. Okay, he's getting all of the vaccinations that he's telling everybody that are bad, or whatever. This mindset that we cannot allow any evidence to alter our worldview. Therefore, we will alter the world to support our worldview. We're gonna make things get into place that validate a completely invalidated worldview. It's been this constant. And there's lawyers and scientists do not get along, and I don't mean personally, but this has been going back for as long as I could. I mean, I attended some hearings at our county government back when I was in California in grad school, because they were the people were complaining that there was an endangered species and, oh my God, this is going to kill our farm, and I watched these people get up there and straight up lie to the city council or whoever it was. I can't remember now, and we were just so frustrated. We even literally had signs that we'd hold up, he's lying, or they're lying. Because there is this narrative that, any sort of restriction on anything, whether it's business or a perceived restriction of my rights to, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, therefore must be applied to everyone. And he has this mentality that I cannot stand, which is, first of all, he's a hypocrite. I mean, he will get all, if he were sick with something, he would take the meds. He's had a measles shot, I'm sure of it. All of these things that he tries vaccine. To, and a COVID vaccine, and probably more than one. And, whether or not he gets a flu shot, well, I don't know. That's debatable. But, we know he's had all those other things. And it is absolutely, but he's then pandering to this subset of people who have this idea of, you don't get to tell me what to do. And the problem with that is, yeah, I understand. Nobody wants to be told what to do. But there was a time when you could look at something and say, not only does this protect me, but this protects my community and my neighbors and those who might not be, able to, eating crappy food, like, okay, so now what? We have to go eat beef tallow on a stick or something? I mean,
bear carcass. You gotta eat bear carcass.
Yeah,
rotten bear carcass. That's the way to go.
Now, full disclosure, this is just a funny story because it's related.
Did you pick up a bear carcass in Central Park this one time and swim in a toxic river?
No. However, my father is retired, but he is a marine biologist, and we lived in Florida. He studied whales, dolphins, and manatees. And when they would wash up on the beach, I would tag along, sometimes with my sister. And I think my sister Jess is in the chat. She's in all the way from Northern Ireland, so I want to give her a big shout out. And we would tag along when he would do the necropsies and cut these things open. And, so I grew up with a lot of smells. However, he has this whole collection of bones and skulls and things. And one time he would send me stuff when I was in graduate school, and I would use these things to decorate my office. And sadly, I have since misplaced, or I don't know what happened to this, or maybe I donated it to the professor at the laboratory when I was graduated. But he sent me a raccoon baculum, which is the penis bone from the raccoon.
Interesting.
And I had it in my cup holder. It's like, hey, what's that? Oh, it's a raccoon penis. Apparently they're quite popular. And didn't RFK go around and try to get one from somewhere? It's like, whatever. I'm like, oh, I had one of those in the 90s. So never.
Back before they were cool.
But it was procured legal. It wasn't like I scraped off roadkill or something to get it. So Jessica says hers is in the pencil jar. So I think I donated some of my collection to our anatomy and comparative anatomy professor's lab when I graduated. But yeah, that's a story for a different day. But if you really want to see the raccoon is nothing, go check out the walrus one. That's a serious. You talk about some masculinity there. Imagine a 2.5 foot piece of ivory.
Jesus, that's not as big as a blue whale's.
No, that we'll have to have Walter to discuss that. But I don't think the blue whales.
Story before.
Blue whales don't have a bone there.
No,
but fun fact: if you're ever in Iceland, go to Reykjavik. You can go to the Icelandic Phallological Museum, which has a specimen of every single creature, including mythical ones. They have, whatever. So if you ever want to just go and be in a penis museum, take that flight to Reykjavik because it's really kind of cool. It's kind of a must see. And the merch shop is on point. I'll just say
Oh,
that.
I bet they probably have some really, really phallic merch there.
I mean, not as good as Just Suck Less, but still, you know,
Well, I mean, you
you've
could
got
always just suck
right.
less.
You could just suck less.
There is a QR code in the top corner over Jason's head if you want to get a water bottle. It's on the Sick of This shop.
Like,
Other side,
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah.
Whichever way it is to point, because it's hard when you're mirrored.
Yeah.
All the directions, folks.
I had to unmirror myself because I was like, why is my cup reading backwards?
Yeah, I have
Guinness
to
cup.
unmirror myself, and it's weird to see because all my shirts always read backwards if I don't.
Yeah. I mean, then you can certainly point more easily. But click that QR code, scan that with your phone. Yes,
do the things, y'all.
Yeah, do all the. But yeah, I mean, but RFK. I mean, the guy is this is the prime example of when you appoint people who are not just unqualified, but woefully unqualified, and who have an agenda. It's like he doesn't even pretend to do his job. His job is to implement this bullshit paradigm where everybody is eating, whatever feral foods. And, I mean, there's elements of what he says that make sense. Like, I mean, it's absolutely valid to question the subsidies for processed foods, where people get their calories from. Because that is a tremendous impact on especially people who are less fortunate in terms of their budget. Go to the grocery store and you tell me if you're going to buy the organic apple or the non-organic apple. I mean, and if you're even going to buy fresh produce, just because you can go buy a can of SpaghettiOs for 99 cents or whatever, or no, today they're probably $2.99 because this economy, there's like inflation and stuff. But you know what I'm saying? It's like,
yeah,
just because he has one or two things, and it really, really irked me when he was going through his nomination and confirmation process, that the governor here in Colorado was like, "Oh, I think this might not be." I'm like, dude, are you crazy?
Well, let's talk about
saying one good thing does not. Oh, I'm just sick of my governor now, and I'm frustrated because I did vote for him twice.
Well, let's talk about it a little bit from a lens of masculinity in terms because that's what the heart of this show is, a better human in conversation. Yes, and masculinity needs to be checked. We're screwed up. A lot of men are screwed up. And we can see it all over the place. What do you think it says about to other men, some of the actions that your governor has taken in capitulation to this regime, to letting people off the hook without true accountability or taking control of their own actions, like the folks who did the election steal or election
Tina Peters. And
Tina Peters.
She's awful, and she was convicted in court with evidence. Okay. And he clearly, I will, let me start off by saying, Governor Polis here in Colorado, while he is a Democrat, he's really a libertarian who leans left. It is very clear. And 8 years ago, when he first got elected, I think, I guess it's 4 years. So he's not running this fall because he's term limited. So we will have a new governor one way or another.
Good for the state of Colorado.
Yeah. I mean, it is good. And you got to put things in historical perspective, though. I mean, Colorado is a purple state. You've got places like Boulder that are, so far left, whatever, places in Denver, Boulder. But you get to the other places out east of here, south of here. I'm in Colorado Springs. This is about as red as it gets. And it is actually trending more to the left. But I mean, I have worked on campaigns here with people who are literally 1 millimeter to the left of Reagan, but lost, as Democrats. So Polis came in 8 years ago took over for Hickenlooper, who's now in the Senate. And Hickenlooper's, he's a moderate Democrat. But before Hickenlooper, we had Republican governors. I mean, Colorado was a red state in the 90s and early 2000s. So this is a part of a transition. So Polis was fine at the time. I thought that he handled COVID poorly, not terribly.
Mm-hmm.
He did do some things, though, starting with that, where he could have kept things, maybe locked down another just 2 more weeks, perhaps, whatever. People get upset about that, but people have to remember, we didn't know what the hell this thing was doing, and people were freaking dying.
Yeah.
I was fortunate living from home, working from home. I didn't
worked
have to
in
go out.
Seattle at the time. Like, we were the first state to close. Like, I worked in Seattle at Amazon at the time, and we were fortunate. Our team and Amazon decided, y'all can go home if you want to, if you have somebody who is sick at home or who is immunocompromised. And then not a week later, the entire state was shut down. And we had some of the strictest standards, but we also had some of the most balanced recovery efforts in our state. So Governor Jay Inslee did a great job on our side.
The problem we had with all of it was this literally was an opportunity for federal, level kinds of stuff. This whole leave it all up to each state is BS, because people can just cross state lines. States were sort of locked down, but not really. They could have handled it all very differently. Nobody knows what that experiment will look like, because we don't have we're not living in a world where we can do that. I thought Polis was smart. He got on top of it early, but then he kind of started caving to the, again, he's libertarian, which is very much pro-individual freedom kind of stuff. So yes, he's a Democrat, but not in his person. He's far more libertarian lefty than, whatever. He probably aligns with Joe Walsh on a lot of certain things, maybe out, with certain stuff. So, for those who don't know, Tina Peters was the election official out in Grand Junction, where I used to live. That's like cowboy country, western slope of Colorado. It's more like Utah. When I first moved to Colorado, I was there for 6 months, and I'm like, I was expecting mountains, and it looked more, it was red rocks and desert, it was definitely more like that. So anyway, she gets busted for literally for tampering with election machines. And, not only that, being an election denier, but she was sentenced for the tampering, not for denying the election result, not for her beliefs, but for actual criminal conduct proven in a court of law. And she was sentenced to whatever. And the part that Polis decides to do was he commuted her sentence to time served, basically, on the grounds that it was not, that the sentence itself was prejudiced, that somehow people let their political biases sentence her to a longer term than she, quote, deserved. Well, that steamed me so much. I mean, I was so frustrated with him at that point, because if there's one thing we've learned with people in charge right now, is that not only do they not, they don't expect to be held accountable. And the reason they don't expect to be held accountable is because they don't think they can be. Yeah. So this performance by Polis, for whatever his political reason may have been, maybe he thought that this was going to curry favor with the tangerine, whatever, perhaps, but that was not laid out. And of course, even if it were the case, he probably couldn't have said it. The whole thing just reeked of, I don't want to say corruption, but just really improper use of executive authority. In fact, I believe that almost all of the attorneys, they came out, they wanted to censure him.
They should have.
He did this right after the legislature had recessed for the summer.
course, a
Right.
coward's way too. Like
Yeah. I
that's a
mean,
coward's way.
he basically said what he said, but it was such a half-ass explanation. And what's it going to get? What is it going to do? It's going to say you are a coward because you can't stand up to, you have an opportunity to uphold and display true leadership. Forget masculinity for a minute, just straight up leadership. Okay. It was an opportunity, and he had an opportunity to say, in the state of Colorado, we uphold the rule of law, and you're not above it, and you don't get off easy because your political positions, differ from mine. And I'm trying to make this, it's like just trying to, it's all like, I would say whitewashing, but it's like it's
well, it is.
Right.
I think whitewashing is the appropriate term, though, on that.
Yeah, it drives me absolutely nuts. So anyway, I mean, I don't know. You got Lauren Boebert, who moves from the Western Slope, which is the aforementioned location. She moves over to the northeast part of Colorado, which is very rural, very conservative, because she knew she was going to lose. She almost lost in 2022. She almost, no, in 2020, was it 2020 or 2022? No, she moved in 2022 because it was clear that she almost lost in 2020, which would have been unheard of. And in fact, the candidate sadly underperformed in Pueblo, which is south of me. And Pueblo's used to be a steel town. I mean, it's blue collar, but it's one of those weird districts where the whole side of the state, and then it kind of wraps around, and because of the necessary demographic to get it all in there. So, again, I don't do the districting, but we actually try to do fair districting here in Colorado. They have a districting commission and stuff to do that. My district shrank because our population has grown. So a district, it's kind of funny because my parents, who live up in the mountains, somewhat more rural, they're retired. They are in an extremely conservative area. I mean, there was literally a sign at the county line when you were driving up the highway that says, "Welcome to Teller County. We are Trump country."
Well, that's gross.
Yeah, I mean, that was the kind of, this was back then. But what happened was, when things got redistricted, their county got lumped in with some other districts on what's called the Front Range. So we've got Colorado as a rectangle. The Rocky Mountains are on there's the plains to the east. We call that Kansas. There's Utah to the west. And then the Rocky Mountains are more or less in the middle. And you've got all these cities that run down the front of the Front Range because that's where they built things. You didn't want to go. So you got Fort Collins in the north, and followed by Boulder and Golden and Denver, and then Colorado Springs, and then Pueblo to the south. And so they got lumped in with these other, which were more blue. So they're now in a blue district.
Well,
because they got cut out of mine. So I'm sure their neighbors were just thrilled by that. But Darius says Teller County is bad. Yeah, I mean, Teller County is kind of, I mean, it's a free for all up there sometimes. But my parents just sit there in their house and don't they walk the dog. It's all good.
This is a cool little bit of a history lesson into Colorado. I'm learning more about the state than I have before. Thank you for enlightening me on some of these things. And yeah, it is beautiful. It's also one of the things I do know about Colorado's history is it is a lot of cults in it. And there's there's very cultish, but then again, the U.S. is founded on cults, so it's hard to say where more cults are than other cults. But like looking at this from a lens of humaning and the accountability and how we can take in to effect, because throughout this series we have come to the conclusion that intelligent masculinity is the refuse, and better humaning in general is the refusal to outsource accountability onto others and the discipline to live with the consequences of your actions and values. And a lot of what we've just talked about was literally no consequences for your values and actions. Like
Mhm.
Jared Polis let off someone for election tampering. And whether you agree with the length of the sentence or not, that could have gone to an appeals court. Like, we have a judicial system
Mhm.
which could have said, oh, yeah, this sentence was too long. We will reduce it. Or she could have gone for parole hearings or anything like that to get her sentence reduced. But that's not what happened,
Right.
because
He could have just
accountability
shut up and
doesn't matter.
colored.
Yeah.
He was performing for an audience of one. And as we've seen time and time again, that works for about a month or whatever. It works until it doesn't. And then all of a sudden you're on. I mean, didn't Janine Pirro, did she get fired or not? It's not clear to me if she was actually fired, but it looked like she was,
I think she has been, but then again, everything is
everything's a blur.
convoluted. Everything's a blur with them, and it's only the women who ever get fired
of
in
course.
this regime.
Of course.
There's been very few, if no men, that have been fired, other than like having to step down. She wasn't fired.
Okay, she wasn't fired. Okay,
she should be, because she's not up to her job. But
that's the definition of these people.
Yeah.
They're there as political appointees, not to run. You look at the cuts to the NIH. You look at I have a good friend who took early retirement last year from NIH in Maryland, I believe. A friend of mine from grad school, very intelligent person, couldn't do her job, was forced to write those "what did I accomplish this week" bullshit emails, when Doge was coming through. Please justify your job to us. This idea that, and the performance of the hero man comes in to save, I'm going to fix everything. And with a stroke of the pen, I'm going to get rid of all this stuff. And you can cheer that all you want. But if you've paid attention to like what we actually spend on those and, staffing levels, most of those agencies were already completely streamlined down to the bare bones anyway. And so now all we're doing is making decisions that have no basis in reality, because we're dealing with people who view things not only in black and white, everything's binary, but they look at everything transactionally as a financial transaction. They can't apply a amount. And I think somebody actually once did a calculation of, what is a human life actually worth in dollars? I don't remember what the answer was, but there was a number, and then, it's like actuarial stuff. It's like, okay, if this is what we will, pay you out in a settlement kind of thing, right? But they don't look at things this way. You're looking at things and saying, what did they see? They see an expense on the ledger. NIH funding for these grants or whatever it might have been, science in general, is an expense. And how much money is that bringing in for us? Well, science is not to bring in money. The role of the government in research is to fund things that spur the private industries to actually benefit, because there's not a lot of value in early primary research funding.
As
in terms of return,
talks about it as basic research. The government is there for basic research, because a company will not invest $1 trillion into an idea that may never pan out. But that's the government's job.
Right. So there was a study, a paper published in a biomedical, science journal. I don't remember which one. It's been a while since I looked it up, but it was published in the mid-90s. Okay. So mid-90s. Yeah, that was 10 years ago for me, Gen Xer. But no, that was 30 years ago, right? 30 years ago. And in the paper, it was basically a demonstration where they said, hey, we were able in a mouse to put mRNA into its cells and have it not degrade because mRNA is fragile. It breaks down very easily. Okay. If just left alone, it's like there was a joke that, DNA was easy to work with. I knew molecular biologists. RNA is like if you looked at it funny, it would fall apart. Okay. That was the running joke with it. So they did this proof of thing where they said, yeah, wow, we were able to get a piece of mRNA into a mouse cell and, a living mouse, and it actually made the protein that we wanted it to do. It did the whole thing. So the paradigm in biology is DNA has your genes, but it's the mRNA that gets created, and those little pieces go out and get built with all the molecules. They put together proteins, and proteins are everything. Proteins are enzymes, and proteins are, they function. Your muscles are protein, everything, right? So the code lives in the library. That's the DNA. You make a copy of it to take out, like when you go to, remember when you would go to the library, and you have to get a piece of information. So what did you do? You Xerox something. So you take the Xerox copy. Hopefully you could still read it. And that's what you would take home. And that was the recipe that you'd use, that you Xerox the recipe out of your cookbook, and you'd go make a cake. Okay.
Print out those MapQuest directions.
I did that too, seriously did that. So anyhow, this was like, whoa, we couldn't believe we actually got this to work. I don't remember who funded that, but it wasn't Big Pharma, it wasn't Moderna. But guess what? That paper from over 30 years ago now was the basis for all the mRNA vaccines, which are, if you adjust, for myself, it's a game changer type of technology. And now we've got an FDA who's saying, well, we're not sure we can approve that because we don't like mRNA because we're convinced it gives you 5G reception in your brain. I can't even get 5G reception in my own house half the damn time. So,
yeah, it's that old philosophy, or this old idea. We talked about it in the Army when I was in service. We joked about it, was that it was when people were really, really starting to get into this idea that the government was putting tracking devices into your water and stuff, and you were going to get these microscopic tracking devices, and the government was going to follow you everywhere you go and watch everything you do. Hey, guess what, guys?
They already do.
They already do.
We were on the same wavelength on that one.
And they have flock cameras everywhere now, so they don't need these tiny tracking devices. And we always joked about it in the military, in the Army, because we have service member tracking systems. It's called a Blue Force tracker. It tracks our service members downrange. It tracks vehicles and it tracks equipment and some of the stuff. We can't even get that to work.
Right.
Like you would. And people are afraid that they were putting microscopic tracking devices into coffee or whatever nonsense at the time. And it's all that like super disconnect of like, there's no basic understanding. Yeah, it's the tinfoil hat folks that put up their crazy ideas, and now they are the ones running the government.
That tinfoil is getting kind of expensive too. I just bought some yesterday.
Oh yeah, like don't be buying tinfoil nowadays. You're gonna have to take out a loan to do that,
right?
Because everything's fucking expensive.
It is a complete 180 from from previous. It's been a progression of this ideology. However, there was a time, which we've now gone completely 180. What we have right now is we know best. Damn what your science says. Because, I mentioned that science and lawyers don't get along. Now, who are lawyers? 90% of the politicians are lawyers. Now, on the one hand, you could say, I hate that. I had a friend who was a scumbag, lawyer politicians. On the other hand, who else is best versed in the understanding of the way, if you're going to be writing laws, you ought to know how they work, right? So there was a time in this country where during the Second World War, where scientists literally wrote a letter to Roosevelt and encouraged him to I believe it was encouraged him to work on the bomb, the Manhattan Project. Obviously, in retrospect, I'm not going to get into that. That's a whole messy thing, right?
There's a lot of fraught but very interesting history there.
Yeah. And I like to say that every law will have unintended consequences. Okay. I'll give you an example. 3 strikes law. We look at that now and go, man, that incarcerated a lot of people unnecessarily, especially people of color. However, in 1990s, early 90s, crime was a huge issue. It was a massive issue. It was the 3 strikes bill was overwhelmingly supported bipartisan. Now you can argue in hindsight 30 years later that was a bad law, along with some other ones. Yeah, it was. But at the time, it was addressing an issue that most people in this country absolutely supported. Now, what did we learn? It has some really bad unintended consequences. So that's your typical scenario, right? You draft a law, you're trying to do something positive. My view of government is that, it should be trying to do something positive. And sometimes you're going to find out that you screwed up something, or, it worked in a different way than you intended. And you hopefully go fix that, right? What I see now, starting with the first administration, is we're going to craft legislation designed to deliberately hurt people in groups that we don't like because we are somehow your, master, and, only we know what's best for you. And what's best for you is cis white men. I have privilege being one, but I see that, it's like I have to check myself a lot of times and realize that I am extremely privileged to be where I'm at right now. Seriously. No matter how challenging things are for me in my own personal space, being self-employed and trying to, eke out a living. And, my healthcare premium went up 600% this year. Thank you very much. But I'm damn lucky that I can still pay that bill. And, I had a mom stay at home with me when I was a kid for the most part. We were able to have a single income family with 3 kids. My dad was a college professor. There was a time when I know if you're millennials, you're probably going, what do you mean? No, there was a time when mom could stay home with you. Now, my mom did go work, but not full-time work. She just would do substitute teaching. So once I got to that age where it was, now we're getting into Gen X trauma, but, once I was old enough to walk my sisters home from school by ourselves, let us in for about an hour or 2 until she finished because she would finish at the school and then come home. So it was latchkey kids, but latchkey light.
Yeah.
I was in charge, and then I was their babysitter. I learned how to make mac and cheese real early on. And, but I have that, but I'm not going to lie, I'm privileged. I also went to public schools because public schools functioned. In fact, even Florida public schools used to be pretty freaking good.
Yeah.
I did the thing. I'm not saying that I could have done this coming from a different background. It would have been tremendously hard for me. My partner did not have that benefit of that family that could care for her and could support her financially on things to do, and had to work her own way through that. I was freaking fortunate. I also did the work, it's not that I didn't, I still had to go to college and graduate and get a diploma, right? I had to do that. And I worked in college, but, I don't understand, that was 30 years ago. It's only gotten worse.
Well, let's dig into that just a little bit, because I want to get one of the things you were talking about in there was this idea of checking yourself and seeing and acknowledging the privilege that you have either systemically or the privilege that you're denied systemically, and how you work through that. One of the things I did not hear you say, and I'm glad I didn't hear you say, but I want to dig into this a little bit, was what I did not hear you say is that you feel guilty. But I did hear you say that I need to check myself and realize where I have that privilege and how to go about working with it. How do you balance
Mm.
and self reflect for yourself so that you don't assign unnecessary guilt to yourself? Because it's not my fault that I was born into a system that said inherently, just because I look this way, I should have more privilege. And we shouldn't. That's not
No,
in any
and
way. But how do you balance that for yourself to continue pushing for progress for yourself, but also to make sure that it's progress for everyone along with you?
right. It is very easy to just look at your bank account, or if you're fortunate enough to have investments, and go, "Oh, hey, look, my investments are going up, so this must be great." Well, that's nice, but I also remember, it's important to have lived experience. It's important to, I don't feel guilty for going through, college and having grandparents who were well enough off that's told my folks, you're, when I was born, they said, we'll take care of Jason's college. Now, of course, college in 1971 was hardly the expense that it was in the early, the late 80s, early 90s. In fact, I saw the, tuition curve jump crazy. And this was at the University of California, which is a state school. When I started at UCLA, I had friends who were in early, older than me, who had you would get a registration card that says this proves that you're currently enrolled and paid your fees. And they had, the dollar amount on that card, and it was quarter system, so we had 3 quarters a year, $225 per quarter. By the time I graduated with my doctorate from the UC system much later, 2002, it was over $1,600 per quarter. Now that's still pretty freaking cheap compared to.
I wish mine was $1,600 a quarter.
Exactly. Now but I paid my way through that. I mean, I taught. I didn't get parental support, but I was aware of the safety net that I had. I wasn't going to go hungry. I can look back on that now and say, you know what? I was very fortunate. I'm very privileged to have done that. However, I also have to put in the work. Like, just because I didn't have to worry about, paying my rent when I was an undergrad didn't mean that I didn't have to go to class. I still had to do that. I still had to get the grade. I was not a straight A student in college. Okay. I mean, I barely got into graduate school. They accepted me on a master's program. I eventually got into the PhD program, but I was there, and you learn real quick that there are people that are smarter than you, and there are people that are a hell of a lot more fortunate than you, and you can see them in their behavior. I knew I was not getting a scholarship, for example. I knew people who had grants or fellowships, and sometimes the way they treated the rest of us wasn't so great. I was not the popular kid in high school. I knew the popular kids, though. I was in that in-between group, I'm sure there were people who thought that I was popular when I was in high school. I think I met some of these people at a reunion 20 years later. It's like, oh my gosh, but it's like, you can't let your accomplishments, you can't diminish yourself for accomplishing something. Even if you had assistance, that doesn't make it any less of a degree, or any less of a credential, or any less of an accomplishment. You still had to do that, but you can realize that your path to that, the learning curve, the barriers that you had were quite lower than the barriers that a lot of other people have, people of color or people of lower economics, status, whatever you want to call that, lower income. We were in that group where it was like my parents made enough money where they said, well, you don't qualify for any of these need-based things. But in reality, it's like with my 2 siblings, like, well, You know, I remember filling out the FAFSA, for the
Yep.
first time.
I remember filling out all those forms too.
Right. And it came back and it just said, and based on this, your parents should be paying, more than a mortgage payment for you. This is what we expect your parents to contribute. And there was no freaking way they were going to be able to do that. And I would have gone to a different school if that, if I hadn't had, certain, family backing. But, I don't let that diminish what I did. But there are people who just, and it goes back to the people who didn't earn anything. What exactly does RFK Jr. put on his CV or resume that qualifies him to do what he's doing? It's the opposite. I am not qualified to run that department, but I'm probably more qualified from my understanding of how science works than some of the people they're putting in these positions. It's like, and I'm seeing it, I see it with people. And the reason I brought up the whole mRNA thing is because there are literally people who are convinced that, and it shows how little emphasis has been placed on just basic understanding of science as a process. But science by design is a process. It is not a dogma. It is never a dogma. The idea behind science is this is the best explanation we have given what we know today. And if something comes along tomorrow that throws it on its ear, we need to look at that and accept the fact that we could have been wrong or not entirely knowing the entire story. A really fun exercise I did once was I had a girlfriend whose aunt had gone to UC Riverside when it first opened in the 50s, the mid 50s, still had a biology textbook from that time. This was like 1954, 55. So I read the chapter on DNA. There was no chapter on DNA. It was like, well, we know it's found in the nucleus, and that's about it. Because the paper describing the structure of DNA hadn't come out yet, or had just come out, and it wasn't in the textbooks yet. It went from that to, oh my gosh, now we know this. And, so many things, sometimes we add to the story, and things actually make more sense with more information. Sometimes we have to change a story. It doesn't mean that the whole thing was wrong. Now, contrast that with the legal profession, where you have to show beyond a reasonable doubt that this did or didn't happen. It's binary. You either prove your case or you can't. And a scientist would say, well, my study showed that this result is the most likely because there's less than 5% chance or even less than 1% chance, depending on your statistical models, that this could have happened randomly. The lawyer will say, but there's still a chance it happened randomly. You see, you can't say that this is 100%. It is an extremely frustrating world to live in if you have any kind of background in science. And, there's, and I was so fortunate to work with a lot of really cool people and professors and other graduate students and, see where everyone came from and different backgrounds, but like I said, I learned real quick that I was not the smartest one in the room. That doesn't mean I didn't graduate, but I had to work at it. There were some people who were golden children, and the same thing happens everywhere.
Thinking on the not the smartest one in the room, this is one of the few things that I took from my time at Amazon that was positive was, and yeah, he's not a good person. Jeff Bezos is not a good dude. But he did, when he was younger, he did put out an idea that stuck at Amazon, which is if you think you're the smartest person in the room, go find a different room.
Yeah, there you go.
Because you shouldn't ever feel like you're the smartest in the room, because then you don't have anything to learn. And if you don't have anything to learn, you're not reflecting or evaluating. And you need to do that in order to grow. So go find a new room where you know you're not the smartest in it. And I think they've all, and it feels like they've all lost that. Like that was such a wonderful ideology and ideal to strive towards, and they've thrown it all away. And we've moved from that scientific mentality to this black and white mentality of it's binary, it's only one or the other. It's not, there are no shades in between. And that's cost us a lot. It's cost us a lot of our humanity, our dignity, and our ability to self-reflect and make smart choices when we're doing things. And this has been a really good conversation, I think, into self-reflection and to
I mean, it's absolutely indicative where we are as a society when critical thinking is not even on the radar anymore.
Yeah, and empathy is considered toxic.
Oh, and there's that. Yeah,
like
absolutely.
We're fighting through stupidity. I don't want to say stupidity, to be totally honest. We're fighting through willful ignorance because that's
and hatred. Straight up hate. I'm doing something to punish these people who I want to blame for all of my problems. Look, if you're not successful, I mean, that's fine, but don't blame it on your brown neighbor.
Yeah, like
don't blame it on the guy who. Yeah, right. I mean, look at yourself first.
Yeah. And this has been a great. I think this has been a really good discussion into that without really saying that up front. Was check yourself. Like, go find a different room. Go ask questions. Go like your experience wasn't when you were in school. Wasn't you were the smartest. It wasn't you were the best. It was. I'm going to learn and I'm going to keep growing, and I might not be the best in this room, but I'm going to persevere through and I'm going to push through.
You find out real quick when you're not the smartest in the room, because when you're smart, you can cruise through things, right? And then you're always going to have that moment where all of a sudden it doesn't click anymore. And for me, that was fortunately early on. It wasn't in science, it was in grammar. I can't tell a gerund from a participle to save my life. But I had a teacher, and she was the ass kicker. It was just straight up strict grammar. It was, you need to learn these rules and do all this. And it's fine. I don't remember most of them. I will split my infinitives as needed to boldly go
where no way through everything.
Yeah, right. But there was a point in that class where I went from always being able to make A's and B's in English to, holy crap, I'm not even pulling a C right now. And that's scary when you're a smart kid. That's a reality check. And I had to work with that, and of course I was pissed. I thought, what do you say? Well, the teacher must hate me. No. What I resented a little bit from that was the teacher I'd had in 7th grade, who was all just, let's read poetry and talk about, things, and not actually teaching us grammar. Because the kids who had the teacher 2 years in a row, they knew what was coming, right? So, I managed to turn it around, but that was 8th grade. I'm thankful for that because, she kicked my ass. I learned something from that. I learned that I had to, the default in those days was if you weren't making good grades, if the teacher called your parents were like, okay, we need to talk about what's going on. Now it's like the teacher calls the parents, and the parents are like, well, what are you doing wrong? Why aren't you teaching my child the right way? It's a complete, difference in accountability. It used to be if the school called, the teacher was right until proven otherwise. Right? I mean, that's just kind of how it was. And I'm not saying all the teachers, they don't have issues. I'm just saying, like, that's kind of the mentality. My parents were never not on my side, but my parents would say, my mom especially, okay, well, you need to demonstrate that you're doing everything you can to improve. If that still is not working, show us that you did the best you can. Show us that you're putting in the time. My mom's like, look, if you get a C in a class and you tried your ass off, and I know you put in that effort, that's how it is. But if you're getting C's in class because you're just not working at it, or you're not willing to put in your own time, no, we're not going to McDonald's. It's like,
yeah,
or whatever. There's no
you're
Happy
not
Meal
getting
for
a
you.
reward for lack of effort.
I had parents would call the graduate department in the biology department when I was, so I taught undergrads intro bio. And I'm not going to lie, I was a hard ass. I had, hey, spelling and grammar count in my class. You got spell check. Microsoft Word existed in 1996. You can spell check this. What do you mean? And I had a great professor whose comment was, well, if a student asks you why you grade them on their spelling and grammar, you say part of science is being able to communicate your results to the community in a way that they could replicate what you did. So if you cannot clearly communicate what you did in your lab experiment, you don't deserve to pass, or you deserve to get dinged on it, right? But there were parents literally calling, complaining about me being too hard. My son has always got, or daughter has always gotten straight A's, but they're not getting an A in Jason's class.
I can't imagine having a parent call while you're in college.
That's
to
where
say
we were.
That you didn't work hard, that the teacher did something wrong. When college is the time where the real onus and accountability to attend classes, to do the work without somebody telling you have to do it, is all on you as the student. And
absolutely,
you fail because in many, and I'm not saying all, many folks who fail in college failed because they didn't do any of those things. They were just like, yep, my parents are going to take care of it, or I don't have to try, I don't need to go to classes.
It's gotten worse, Nick. Have you heard of lawnmower parenting?
No. What the fuck?
So you've heard of helicopter parenting?
That sounds a lot like I'm gonna run your ass over and...
No, I'm going to mow down any perceived obstacles for my child, not only in school, but also at work. There have been reports now of parents are calling employers saying, why aren't you taking, like my son applied for this job, my daughter applied for this job, and we need, I want to clear any perceived barriers, real or otherwise, for my child so they can get this job or they can, do whatever. It's a thing. It's a thing. I read about it several years ago, but it came up in a different conversation that I had earlier this week. I think it was someone wrote about it. I wrote a comment about it. But it's ludicrous. I mean, everybody's got a different style of parenting, of course, but your job is as a parent when your kid goes to school is to let them know you're in their corner, but this is their time. I got your back, but that's different than I'm going to call and complain about when you're not getting good grades. There's a big difference there. So, yeah. I mean,
now, you do have a good point there, is wealthy parents have more privileged parents have been doing this.
Look at the ones who got arrested for that whole scheme of getting their kids, right? I mean, that whole, was it SAT thing or just a college, they were paying.
I remember that. I think that was when I was in school.
This was, celebrities were getting nailed for this.
I actually think that was when I was in college the first time in the mid 2000s. Like that was
starting to happen.
Yeah, like that was starting to come out as this is what was happening and how it was.
Money is going to create problems no matter what, but the rest of us, but there's limits to what you want to be supportive of your kids. Absolutely. There need to be limits and boundaries to what
there's a difference between supportive and mowing people down. Like there's a difference between,
right.
Like my goal for my kids is I want to teach you to, one, be a productive member of society, whatever that productive means. It doesn't mean you have to produce for somebody else. It doesn't mean you have to produce wealth for others, but a productive and contributing member of society who isn't a complete asshole. Like, that's my goal.
That's the bar.
My
Yeah, there's
goal
your
is to
bar.
make you a decent person who values people and is willing and wants to give back into their community in some way. You're not a
Yeah.
complete asshole. Like, you have to take care of yourself. You have to learn lessons. You have to take accountability, and you have to own it. And I do understand that I come from a place of privilege when I say that. Is it's on me and my kids and my family to ensure that we don't laud privilege, and that we ensure that the privilege we have can be expanded and provided to others in an equitable way, so that we all have the same types of privilege.
When privilege becomes entitlement, we've crossed a line.
Yeah.
Privilege is something you can recognize. It's hard. Like we said at the top of the show, we have to, whoa, wait a minute. I gotta, sometimes I do know that I'm in a conversation that I know more than somebody else. And it's hard for me sometimes to not be frustrated by that. But or worse, have to argue with somebody who doesn't have any. But there's more. But that's different than saying this therefore entitles me to a job or this position or whatever. And I think what we're seeing now is entitlement writ large at all these different levels of at least our current federal government, and it's frustrating. But we have to teach people, just to loop back, we just have to get to that point where you can't just look at something in a budget as a expenditure or a revenue item. You look at what you spend on USAID, the benefit in terms of human cost is far greater than any amount of dollars you put into that.
Yeah.
When you live in a world that's binary, that just says, well, why are we spending $1 million here? That could be, now it's one thing to, and worse, and we're going to use that to give, tax breaks to people who don't need them. But that's a different story. Just the fact that you could look at something in just a very transactional and, spreadsheet kind of way, a balance sheet kind of assessment, doesn't reflect any kind of human benefit.
Yeah, and even if they wanted to take the human benefit part of it out of it and just go to the transactional part, sticking on USAID for just a second before we get to the final piece, because we're a little over time, and Jason, thank you for giving me some extra time this morning, is if you actually looked at what we spent for USAID, every dollar we spent, we got $1.20 back. We made profit on saving human lives. It is more profitable to save lives than it is to kill them.
Same is true with SNAP.
Yes. Every dollar we spent,
every dollar
we got more back.
Right, because people go out and buy stuff. And if that means you not only spent what you got in the SNAP, but now you have a larger budget to spend on other things.
Yeah.
Oh, well, I guess I'm a socialist.
Well, yeah, it's just
or something socialist. Like that.
Damn communist.
I know. I left my Red Star hat somewhere. I don't know where it's.
Did you forget your sickle and scythe somewhere else?
I just, it's at the cleaners.
Oh, okay. Is it with your iron? Is it with that iron fist that you have in the back too?
It's it is a hardcore thing. The Antifa meeting is in an hour. So
you got to get ready for that Antifa meeting.
Yeah,
to get yourself ready for that Antifa meeting, I've got 4 really, really, really quick questions to ask you, because I want to make sure that we do a little bit of a whimsical, and I know you've been in some of these episodes and listened in before, is we break down the Mulans, I'll make a man out of you, into 4 super quick questions on the spot. And you've got no preparedness in this. So
none.
This fun.
And I haven't even seen Mulan, because that came out when I was really heads down in other things, and I no longer have my Disney subscription. No, I want to go watch it now, but it's like, I canceled a lot of my streaming and turned it into.
Well, the original Mulan is wonderful, and it came out when I was younger, and it provided, and we used to sing it in our men's choir. Is this song, and the chorus lines have some really great questions that can be asked. So here we go. What does it mean to you to be as swift as a coursing river? And there's no wrong answer.
Right. I'm gonna do two things here. I'm gonna quote John Wooden.
Okay.
Be quick, but don't hurry. So that's wisdom from them. And then just to, navigate, be nimble, be able to be agile.
Love it. How do you embody the force of a great typhoon?
Uh, it's probably not pizza and beer. I think it requires, acting from a place of informed intelligence, and trying to lift up others at the same time, with, do putting in the work, I would say.
I like that. Next, how are you strong as a raging fire? Not an uncontained fire, but a raging fire.
When I set my mind to something, I follow through on it. Whether it's a project or trying to put together a photography trip, or even just writing my blog articles, I will sit down and I will get that thing done if it takes till 2 a.m.
Love it. Finally, how are you as mysterious as the dark side of the moon?
Oh, it's my haircut, clearly. I think it's that's one where there's a lot of stuff, in growing up, and life experiences that haven't been shared yet. So I think that we don't always present everything on the outside that we have on the inside. So there is still mystery there.
Love it. I think that's fantastic. And Jason,
that's why you got to come to we'll have to have you on the Latchkey Hour podcast at some point.
Oh, absolutely. I'd
dress
love
up
to.
and talk Gen X retro things like Pac-Man or something, whatever.
I'm a mid millennials.
Yeah, we accept Gen X adjacent.
Yeah, I'm
you
Gen
grew
X
up watching
adjacent.
Saturday morning cartoons.
My first words were turtle power. So
there you go. So
I grew up watching the right stuff.
Right.
I could probably sing the entire DuckTales theme song from the top of my head.
Go.
So
did you watch Pinky and the Brain?
Yes.
Yes.
Ren and Stimpy, Rocky and Bullwinkle.
Right. So you're good. You're good.
Yeah.
You passed the audition.
Good. I'm welcomed. Jason, my final question is, where can people find you and how can they support your work? And I'm going to put a QR code for you.
Yeah, there you go. Well, yeah. So people said I looked like the Edge in that picture. I was not going for that vibe, but I guess, whatever. Well, the easiest thing to do is just hit the subscribe button, wherever that is, up at the top of this button up there, and you'll subscribe to The Photographer's Perspective. It's where I write about photography, creative outlet, travel, all kinds of things. I also have a personal Substack, which is just where I put things that aren't photography and Gen X brain droppings, like George Carlin used to say. That's really the best place to find me. I've kind of taken a roll in the, I have a website, but I haven't maintained that like I maintain my Substack page. So I have that. And if people are really interested in those kinds of things, I appreciate paid subscriptions because I am literally self-employed. And so this is a big way to help me do what I do. So I just appreciate you giving me some time to chat today, Nick. It's been great.
Yeah. Thanks for joining me today, Jason. And I'll have to have you back on too, because I've got more questions I can ask. This was also a really good conversation. And I think a lot of people seem to really enjoy it today in the chat. So thanks everyone for being here with us. Thanks for taking the time to hang out with me and Jason. And this has been Intelligent Masculinity here on Sick of This Shit Publications. I'm Nick Paro, not your dad. And I'm going to stand up for a second. Humanity is not for debate. And I think we talked about that enough today in a good way, is humanity is not for debate. Learn for yourself, go forward in life. And thanks everyone, because we're done being sick of this shit here. And now we're doing this shit. Thanks, Jason. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Nick.